All right, so excited to get started today as people start rolling in, and we'll see what sort of turnout we have here as we go live. And maybe just getting started. It may take a few minutes for everyone to join. We're streaming, hopefully, to several different platforms at the same time. So this is all a new experience for me. And all right. All right, so it looks like we're starting to have some people rolling in. It's just taking a little bit of a delay here to get the stream going to the various platforms. And so it's good to see everyone today joining us. And if you would, please do enter in the chat where you're joining us from and on what platform as well. And today we're going to be talking about the 7 levers to overcoming ageism in 2021. And let me share my screen and we'll get started. All right. Okay. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about the 7 levers that you can pull in order to overcome ageism in 2021. And let me do this. And I'm still getting familiar with Restream, and so bear with me if there's any sort of technical difficulties here. All right, let me get this out of the way as well. And all right, so here we go. All right, so 7 levers to overcoming ageism in 2021. And so as a brief introduction, for those of you that have not ever encountered me online, my name is Mike Wheeler. I'm the founder of Mike Wheeler Media. My mission is to train and inspire and equip you for your cloud career. I have 5 Salesforce certifications plus 1 retired certification. I've had the privilege and honor of teaching now over 140,000 students across 175 countries who collectively consume over 1 million minutes per month of my online content. And I've worked professionally on the platform, Salesforce platform, as an administrator, developer, consultant, and trainer. And also I'm a podcast host as well. So today's agenda, we're going to be going through a lot in the next maybe 30, 45 minutes or so, but I want to save some time at the end for any Q&A. And so do please introduce yourself in the chat and tell us where you're joining us from, as well as what platform you're on. We're streaming to a lot of different platforms, hopefully. I assume it's working as the count of viewers is starting to go up. So I'm questioning how many actual platforms we're actually on right now. But the goal is to be streaming to Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Periscope, which is eventually going away. It's a Twitter property that's going away at the end of the year. And then as well, Twitch even. So we'll see how that goes, or if anyone puts down their gaming controller and joins us from Twitch. So we're primarily going to be focused on the 7 levers to overcoming ageism in 2021. And then we'll be answering your questions at the end. So here comes some chat. So welcome to Tracy from Omaha. Awesome. Watching from LinkedIn. Good to know that that's working. Very awesome. And then Erica from Granada, Trum, one of my students. Awesome. Dave, Facebook user from Texas, and joining from LinkedIn is William. So excellent. Great to see a crowd starting to join. So hello to everyone. All right. So the first lever that I want to talk about is authority. Okay. So there's 7 levers that we want to talk about. And so the first lever would be authority. And what I mean by that is there's a few things that you can do that I think are mistakes that people make that kind of harm them in their attempt to remain relevant as far as trying to overcome ageism. And so ageism typically is for those that are older, those of us that are in their 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s or whatever it may be. And you find it to become increasingly more difficult to be hired because people start to view you as out of touch, perhaps, or close to retirement age. And a lot of times hiring managers, recruiters are thinking they want to hire someone long-term, 20 plus years or something like that, even though those days are typically gone now. And what I've seen in like the cloud ecosystem, whether that be Salesforce or other cloud solutions, and we'll be talking about other cloud platforms as well, here momentarily. But what I'm seeing is that typically people stay in a job between 18 to 36 months, and then they pivot to the next step up in that progression as they gain more experience. And so as you're branching into trying to change careers or pivot into something new or trying to gain more relevancy in the economy of now, what you can do is you want to embrace your past in order to empower your future. And I see a lot of people make the mistake of trying to hide their past and trying to portray themselves as some expert in a new space, and they are kind of covering up the things that they've done for the past 10 or 20 or 30 years. And part of leveraging authority in your social media profiles and in your personal branding is to actually embrace your past, because you've got a wealth of experience if you fall in this category of working in certain industries and having certain connections and knowing the lingo, and that all can be helpful. And so some things that you want to strive towards becoming, perhaps, and I think as we get started down this path of talking about these 7 levers, is that you're not going to want to do every single thing that I mentioned, and it may be like, okay, that's nice, but this isn't for me or whatever. But my goal in this talk is to have you come away with at least one thing that you can implement, but hopefully several things that you can implement that you'll find of value. So if we talk about being a thought leader or trying to strive to become a thought leader, that gets into the space of personal branding. And I guess mistakes I see people make here is that they tie themselves to just one platform or one piece of software, and rather than really branding themselves as in a wider range, if you will. And for example, when I was starting out and thinking about teaching online, I could have called myself Salesforce Mike because that's what I taught. But I really didn't want to have, quote unquote, all my eggs in one basket. I wanted to have a diversification so that I could speak to things beyond just Salesforce. And today is a good example of that, even though I do talk about Salesforce a lot. Something like a topic like ageism is something that applies across the board for every industry, every vertical, every platform. And so think about the things that you've done in the past, going back to the first point there, as far as embracing your past to empower your future. And what are some things that you could be a thought leader on, and start thinking about developing your own personal branding. And then part of what this looks like now, and I really want to encourage you to think hard about this, is actually creating content. And this is something that I think is growing more and more important with each day. And this can come in many different forms as far as video, audio, or written. And you need to start thinking as in terms of being a content creator, and that will help broaden your reach as well, and will help to be able to exemplify that you are an authority in certain areas and that you do have value to add. And along the way, as you're progressing, if you're learning a new skill or you're trying to attain a certification or trying to land a job in a new vertical or on a new platform, I do encourage you to document your journey. And a lot of people try to wait until they become an expert in all things before they start to document their journey. But I think that the people that I see succeed in this endeavor of trying to either rebrand themselves or reinvent themselves in a new career is that they admit where they're at in their journey. And the fact is that we all start from the same place whenever we're trying to learn a new skill. And we start from zero, we start from scratch. And we all at one point learned how to drive, perhaps. And when you're starting out, everything feels foreign. But in this space of trying to leverage whatever authority you have in whatever space you have expertise in, as you're branching out and adding new tools to your toolbox, I encourage you to document your journey along the way. And that makes you relatable to others. And so just approaching this with what I call documentality, having a mentality of that you're going to document your journey. This may take several different forms as far as YouTube videos or creating a blog or writing articles on LinkedIn or any number of things. And then as well, whenever you're online, in whatever places that you visit, you'll want to be able to contribute and add value, okay? And add your voice to discussions, and then as well add positivity wherever you are, because that is a trait that is becoming increasingly rare nowadays. And so there's a lot of people out there that just default to being negative and being contrarian. And that doesn't cast you in a positive light. You want to be someone that's bringing the positivity, adding the value, and adding your voice to discussions, and not looking to take, but to give your opinion, your feedback, your advice. I had several people, perhaps some of you here that are joining us live today, have done just that in comments or posts that I've made online. And one of the things I recently posted was about ageism, of course, the topic of today, and asking for people's feedback on what they've encountered, and have received a lot of great feedback from others as well. And so another thing I want to encourage, and this is kind of the final point of the authority lever, or the first lever, is that I encourage you to go all in with LinkedIn and really invest some time in updating your profile, creating a profile, updating it frequently, and also being one to connect with others and make comments on posts and interact. And that way you can start to gain connections and start to portray more and more of being an authority. That's something that's important for those of us that are older, that may have what is viewed as a shorter career span left in our tank or whatever. And that way that can have a certain appeal to certain companies. And it won't appeal to all companies, but as one person said, if you're being ruled out because of your age, then you wouldn't want to work for a company that has such limited vision anyways, all right? So one example, and here's an image of one of my students. His name is Gene Nass, I mispronounced his last name. And this is just an example of someone that gets it as far as trying to convey authority. And he learned at Salesforce. He's one of my students. And he had the opportunity to attend Dreamforce, and he had the opportunity to take a selfie with co-founder of Salesforce, Mark Benioff. And so you better believe that he used this in his social media, because he's pictured right alongside of the founder of Salesforce. That does convey that helps in a certain level of authority. Now, granted, Gene is not, someone that's suffering from ageism, but this is something to where if you can have opportunities to connect with those that are influential in a place that you're wanting to have an impact on, then try to do things in conjunction with others and kind of leverage their audience as well. So always be thinking about, from a personal branding perspective, what are things you can do that are visual and at a glance, like your profile picture or anything like that. All right, so then lever 2, all right? So lever 2 is called Yoda I Am, okay? And so with this, prosperous you'll be if self-awareness you see, all right? So in this new era of life or in a career, I encourage you to think hard about embracing your new role as a Yoda instead of Luke Skywalker, okay? This is obviously a Star Wars analogy. You won't get it if you haven't seen it. Hopefully you've seen it. But the idea is that now in kind of the second stage of your career, or the second half of your career, your days as Luke Skywalker may indeed be over, but that doesn't mean that's the end of the book for you. And what you can do is prepare others to destroy the Death Stars of the world, if you will, or to have success in business. What I mean by that is that, much like Yoda, if you can take on more of the mantle of being a coach or an advisor. And some of the things that I do very purposefully is I have this white beard, but I'm playing a role of being a teacher, being a coach, and helping others to pivot in their career or learn a certification. And that is something to where it is more acceptable and readily embraced if you're in a position of being like a trainer or a teacher, something along those lines. And so you got to ask yourself, and this is, William, that is true. It is a great lesson for May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. And I didn't even think about that, but hey, it was meant to be, I guess. But think about, what wisdom do you have to share? All right. And that you can add value. There's a lot of wisdom from life experience that you've gained, and that is valuable as well. You may not, and it's real easy for you to discount that, because the things that come easily to you and the things that you've learned over the years, you just kind of take for granted. But you forget what you wouldn't give 20 years ago if you could convey what you know now to your younger self. There's a lot of other younger self versions of you out there in the world that could gain value from what you have to share, the wisdom that you've learned, the time and the experience and the scars that you want to help others avoid, okay? And so think about, what hacks do you know? What shortcuts, what advice, what things to improve other people's lives. And just when you boil it down, being relevant has to do with saving people time and saving people money. If you can figure out ways of doing that, then people will pay for that, either through a job or a freelance thing or any number of other options. And so with this, where this is heading is I want you to start thinking about what are known as digital asset classes. This is where the economy is heading, and it's really already here, but it's really going to be mainstream in the next coming years. There's a lot of things that fall under this category. And as I mentioned at the onset of this, that I hope that you find at least one thing you can take away from this that will be useful, or a golden nugget amongst many different things that I share. But some of the things that are important as it relates to digital assets is that they're frictionless and they're also scalable. It's not a one-to-one coaching relationship, but you can do something or create something and then that scale across to millions as well. And just having or cultivating a mindset of being a product owner rather than a product promoter. And this means creating products that are like digital products, such as courses or live events, much like what I'm doing here, and even creating intellectual property. There's other categories this falls under, such as cryptocurrency, which is really big right now, and non-fungible tokens, aka NFTs. There's a lot of different areas to where you can get involved in. And you might think, well, what's this got to do with my career or ageism? And what it has to do with this is that these are the things that equal relevance in the economy of now. And so if you can speak to some of these topics intelligibly and provide some value and some content, whether that's written, audio, or video, or all of the above, that will help you to portray yourself more as an expert or an authority and more as a coach, more like a Yoda, and helping to prepare others. And so I think it's really underestimated the power of being able to create a course and sell it online. And that was something that was very eye-opening for me when I was starting out. And it's changed my life. And a lot of what I do now, whether it's what I'm doing this second, or if it's things that I create that are on demand and people pay for, is that's 20 years of experience in multiple different industries that have been packaged up in a video format, okay? And so it's taking what's in here and turning it into a digital product. So I want you to start thinking about that beyond the realms of why can I not get interviewed? Why can I not get hired? To, okay, if those doors are closed to me, what are some doors that are obviously open to me? And these are obvious doors that are open that you may not know exist. So I've just kind of exposed you to some of these. And so think about what you can do that could be a product that you could create that would help meet a need, save time, save money, help advance someone's career, something like that. So that's lever 2, okay? All right, so lever 3 is to be the grown-up in the room, okay? Now, there's a lot of companies that kind of give off a feel of that there's not a grown-up in the room. And a lot of times those are younger, more immature companies as far as startups go. And the point about any startup or any company is that in order for them to survive, they need to mature. And this is a commonly recurring theme that you see across a lot of these big up-and-coming companies, where they have some meteoric rise and then they have some huge crash because there wasn't a grown-up in the room. And so I think because people do learn, hopefully, from history and from cautionary tales and the documentaries that you see on various channels as far as what not to do in business a lot of times, you'll see that companies are beginning to learn that there needs to be some sort of institutional maturity from the onset a lot of times to avoid some of these mistakes that companies fall into if there's some charismatic founder that is giving a lot of leeway to make a lot of mistakes, you know, and the saying is to move fast and break things. But typically, those that survive need some sort of maturity level. That means having a mixture of those with different experience levels, different ages. And we are in the age of diversity now. And so definitely one of those categories that is being addressed is ageism. and being more open to hiring individuals that are even coming out of retirement, okay? And so I've got examples of students that have come out of retirement and have been hired in their late 60s by Fortune 500 companies. One would be Stephanie Rhodes, and you can find her. I've done a couple of interviews with her, one when she was in her 60s and one now when she is 71, about to turn 72, and still working as a Salesforce administrator for a Fortune 500 company. And so Stephanie's a good example of someone that put her life experience to use, also made her own experience, built an application, and did really well in the interviews and landed a job, has been there for 3 or 4 years now and plans to be there for at least another 3 or 4. And so I think that smart and wise companies realize that the typical time frame that someone stays in a job now in a cloud ecosystem is 1.5 to 3 years, and they're not looking for the person on the other side of the desk is not necessarily looking for a 20 or 30-year commitment is going to give you a watch upon retirement. They just need their problem solved now, and they hope to retain you, and that's on them to retain you because there's so many other opportunities that you can step up and change positions, because as you gain skills, you become even more and more relevant in the economy and more marketable. And so those that hire you will need to, come to the table to pay you accordingly, because there's always another company willing to do that if you were to pivot. Okay, so life experience matters. Now, you can get kind of despondent depending on where you're at in your career and thinking about how artificial intelligence and automation is coming for our jobs, and isn't that discouraging? But the point is that the resistance to this is futile. Okay, automation and AI is going to win, but that doesn't mean that they're going to destroy us or that they're going to take all of our jobs. Okay, so I encourage you to let the robots do what they do best, which is to automate menial tasks at scale. And then you focus on the areas where humanity excels, okay? So thinking about what is the most important skill that you can attain now in order to be relevant into the future in facing this onslaught of AI and automation would be communication. And so you need to really double or triple down in your communication skills, and in this endeavor, be the voice of season and reason. Okay, you've got some seasoned experience, and being the voice of reason, be able to share through effective communication various bits of advice and tips and wisdom, because you have seen things go south in the past in certain scenarios. And a lot of the times, those in a more immature or less experienced organization don't have that sort of life perspective. And so you can share your perspective from things that you can relate to in the past. Okay, so that is lever 3. All right, so lever 4, time on platform. Doesn't matter what platform it is, but the thing is learning new skills on what I'm calling a platform, and TOP, time on platform. Okay, so there's this conventional wisdom, and there's been studies that, and I don't know how accurate this is, because I think natural born skill will shorten your on-ramp to getting to the expert status. Also, hard work will as well. But typically, for someone to show proficiency to an expert level, they figure that takes about 10,000 hours of time, okay? And so a few things to keep in mind is that the more time you spend on a platform, whether that's Salesforce or Microsoft or Google or whatever it may be, that those skills are transferable, they are relevant. And so if you learn on one platform, you can relate that to another. And I've seen many of my students study towards Salesforce certification, and then they're hired on not in a Salesforce role, but in a Microsoft role or a Google role or an Amazon role. And that's fascinating to me, because I think companies realize that if you understand the conceptual level, the business processes that underpin something like a customer relationship management endeavor, then they know, okay, you can learn the lingo and where to click on this other platform. Okay, so it's not so much stressing over which platform you choose, or I want to make sure I pick the right one. It's just start learning cloud concepts. And to me, I think Salesforce is the easiest to learn. Others would beg to differ, of course. It's just what resonated with me and what clicked with me. But it's just starting down that path of accumulating those hours on the platform. But what can help, though, is to land a job in order to get paid to learn. And how that happens is that because of an intense skills shortage, this gives you a shortened on-ramp. And so a lot of hiring companies are willing to overlook the lack of 5 years of experience or the 10,000 hours. They recognize that they're not willing to pay market rate for an expert that has 5 years experience. They just need these things done, and they're willing to take someone with less experience or even no experience sometimes. So that shortened on-ramp happens because of a skill shortage that is just increasing. And this way you can get in a position to gain those hours and being paid while you're doing it as well. Okay, so that's time on platform lever 4. All right. And so just as a reminder, I'll be answering questions at the end. I see recognize some names here. Vitaly, hello. I am going to schedule an interview with you. Vitaly's from Russia, doing a great job on personal branding, and going to be talking to him here soon. All right. And then some of you, it's LinkedIn user instead of a name, but keep the comments coming in the chat. That's awesome. And all right, so lever 5 coming up. Here we go. Find your intersection between attainable and essential. So with the pandemic hitting and things being locked down, and then certain industries and businesses being identified as essential, that really stuck out to me, and that really caught my attention. And this was, March or April of last year was when things really started coming to a halt here in the United States. That varies depending on where you are in the world, of course. But I really reflected a lot on this, and it seemed like business kind of ground to a halt across the globe for a few months while everyone was trying to figure out what this new normal is. And this was the time when I first launched my podcast, which is known as You Relevant. And I talk in there about finding the intersection between attainable and essential. There's certain tools and technology that are attainable, but then you've got to also marry that with an essential industry. Now, granted, things are starting to open back up in a lot of areas, but we don't know if there's going to be future lockdowns or shutdowns or whatever it may be. A lot of talks of different strains of the COVID-19 becoming COVID-21 or whatever it may be. We don't know what the future holds, but we know from our recent past, to expect the unexpected. So I think it's very wise to find what your intersection between attainable and essential is, okay? Now, what that looks like is thinking about and asking yourself, what are skills that are readily attainable? And these will vary depending on your own talents and background and experience. And to me, I talked about how Salesforce just clicked with me. I discovered that particular platform in a bookstore, actually. I was looking at different computer and tech books and was learning about and discovered Salesforce as an option. And that just really resonated with me. And I saw that this was something that was more attainable than learning how to code or doing Java or doing C++ or C# or any number of different development things, web development. And I had tried all those things and had gotten a certain amount of down the road or whatever, but always would hit some sort of wall to where I would get to where things weren't making sense and I just couldn't get over that hump. And so to me, Salesforce was a readily attainable technology. And then as well, I do encourage you, I often say in a lot of my different talks, how important it is to become a creator in the consumption world. And that's because the barrier to entry of becoming a creator is lower every day, and it becomes easier and easier to create content. I talked previously about creating content. You can do video, audio, written, whatever it may be. And so now anyone can broadcast to the world and gain an audience and share their thoughts or whatever. And so the challenge now is to stand out from the crowd and have a unique voice and to be adding value rather than just shouting or just trying to draw attention by doing something ill-advised for your career or whatever it may be. And so the point is, though, in thinking about becoming a creator in a consumption world, is that the supply versus demand ratio is increasingly on the side of creators. And you'll notice if you just observe those around you, they're tethered to their phone, their heads are down, and they're just consuming content. And so if you can pivot away from being one of those just all-time consumers to becoming a creator and creating that content, that supply versus demand ratio will favor you. That is something that's marketable, either in your own endeavor or doing that for someone else. It doesn't have to be that you have to be the creator of everything or create your own products. You can always be doing that, doing marketing or product promotion or thought leadership for a company, but start to exemplify that in your profile, in your social media networks, and thinking about that supply versus demand ratio, I really strive to identify more as a creator than a consumer, because anyone can consume. It takes no talent, and everyone does it. Okay, so the things, or kind of your math equation now that I want to leave you with for this lever, is that you need to pick a business fundamental, and just pick one. It's marketing, sales, or service. And the way that you can do that is look at what you've been paid to do in the past and things that you resonate towards and that you enjoy. And so there's really three fundamentals to any business, and that's marketing, sales, or service. So that's one part of the equation. And then the other would be to add an industry and really just identify what are industries that you've enjoyed working in, that you have experience with. It's a lot easier to just add a tool to your toolbox, such as Salesforce or some other cloud solution, and add that to your toolbox and stay in an industry that you have a lot of connections and experience in, rather than adding a platform or software and changing industries as well. So really identify, have you found success in technology or IT? Well, it's kind of the same, technology, but like higher education or government or manufacturing or retail. And, I think about different people that I've worked with in the past, and I've had a wide and varied career as a technical writer and a trainer. And during that time, I had the opportunity to bounce around across a multitude of verticals. And so I did projects for retail, and I've done projects for pharmaceutical companies. I've done for medical in other forms, especially here in the Nashville area. And so that's your equation for that particular lever as far as finding your own intersection between attainable and essential. And then think through, whenever things were really in lockdown, what were the industries that were considered essential? And so finding what tools are attainable and then what industries are considered essential. And so that's how you can kind of start to piece together your own target or your own sweet spot based on your own experience, plus what you've learned in the past year as to what is considered essential. Okay. All right. So lever six is having a mostly cloudy outlook. What I don't mean by that is I don't want you to think, oh, I need to have some doom and gloom outlook on life. No, what I'm talking about is the cloud, okay? And I know it's become such a buzzword that it's cliche, but having a mostly cloudy outlook means having pivoting your career more towards cloud-based technologies, because as we've seen, and as this is going to continue, work is going to become increasingly remote and off-premise. And you're going to see companies retiring their own data centers in favor of the cloud. Salesforce has seen that, and other cloud platforms have seen that as they've embraced more of a remote workforce. And they're also needing to retire antiquated systems in order to remain competitive and to cut costs and to cut infrastructure costs as far as shutting down buildings and allowing for a remote workforce. You see this moving more towards the cloud. It's something that needed to happen over the past decade, and COVID has actually forced the hands of slow-moving companies. And now, to remain relevant and competitive, that's going to continue. A lot of places are trying to call people back into the office, and people are like, I kind of like working in my PJs. No, thank you, because there's so many different companies that are willing to accept remote workers. And that also helps you to find people with relevant skills if you open up the pool of applicants across the globe, rather than saying, okay, they have to be within a 15-mile radius of our building. Those days are going away very quickly. So I've got this bullet point here. SaaS means software as a service, but I want you to think about this as SaaS, which is software at your service. And these tools can be something that you can leverage and use to advance your own career. And you can actually build applications on these platforms as a learning exercise, as a way of gaining more experience, but to actually use those tools not only to learn and to get certified in, but to actually use in your own life to manage job leads, recruiter management, resume management, and job opportunities. And so you can actually do that. I do have a course on how to do that. I'm not going to go into that now, but I do teach people how to do that and how to use Salesforce specifically in order to advance their career. All right, so that's having a mostly cloudy outlook, and in the end, looking at a software at your service. And it's not about you serving the software, but the software serving you and your goals, okay? And you being the one in control of the software, getting to the point to where you can call the shots, make the applications, and have those benefit you, save you time, save you money, and get you landing into relevant jobs, really targeting companies that you would like to work for and things like that. So it really doesn't matter what platform. I'm known for teaching Salesforce, and that's because to me it's the most attainable path to a cloud career. But then for every Mike Wheeler sitting here saying, oh, do Salesforce, there's others saying do Amazon for Amazon Web Services, or Google for Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure, or Power Apps, or whatever it is. And there's many other cloud solutions as well. And so the main point is, and this may be your main takeaway, is that there are options out there. There's a lot of different options and platforms, and part of this journey is to take some time to kind of check them out and see what resonates with you and what clicks with you. And it's not so much worrying about, oh, are there going to be enough jobs here? Is this particular industry or platform more prone to ageism or whatever? These are all have extreme shortage of talent out there, and there's a huge supply versus demand imbalance in the favor of you. And so that helps you overcome ageism. Now, you're still going to face it some, but not near as much as you would if you were trying to get a job in an industry that's saturated with talent. There's a shortage of talent, so people are willing to look the other way and accept you, whatever age you are, because of, if you have these skills, they are so in demand, okay? I kind of equate it to like the NFL draft, and you see all these different teams vying for the top pick, and you even see teams tanking, and this could be NBA or NFL or NHL or MLB. If there's some prime prospect, which there was in the NFL this year, there's teams that would actually lose games on purpose to try to get the #1 spot to get what they think is going to be their savior in the coming years. And so having these skills is much like being 6'5" and being able to throw a football 80 yards on a dime or whatever. And because it doesn't grow on trees, okay? Not everyone has that, but you can acquire this. It is attainable. So pick a platform and think of that platform as at your service, and it can be used by gaining these skills to advance your career. All right. All right. Seventh and final lever, and then we'll get to Q&A, is have a pivot plan. It's very important to have what I call a career relevancy plan. Okay. And so with doing a pivot, it's much like in basketball. If you're heading one direction, then you pivot to the other. You want to not overdo it too quickly, or you're going to blow a knee out. Especially at my age, you would blow a knee out. But there's a time whenever you're pivoting from one career to another, or trying to reinvent yourself, or starting to portray yourself as an expert in a certain area, that you're riding two rails. Basically, there's your existing job or vertical you may be in, and then there's this desired change of path that you're wanting to do. And so there's a time that you need to keep those two rails in alignment. You don't want things to go off the rails. And it is very important to have a plan and to time things properly. And much like with a pivot, you're pivoting your weight from one leg to the other. And if you just do that wildly out of balance, then that can cause some damage. And so what I want to encourage people to do or think about is to not quit the day job in order to pursue the dream job or the ultimate goal or whatever. And think of this more, it's not so much even that a career ladder exists nowadays, but it's more like career scaffolding. You may take some jobs that serve a certain purpose, but then there's a higher or grander goal in mind ultimately. And you ultimately will get to that path that you want to get to, but it may take some time. So it's all about having that plan, thinking it through, and not doing anything ill-advised like quitting the day job in order to devote all your time to this new path or whatever. I think that that's a huge mistake. And I think that slow and steady wins the race here, and just really being thoughtful and analytical about your approach. Now, if you are, laid off or let go or whatever, fired, whatever it may be, or your company that you work for goes under, then that kind of frees you up then to kind of go all in on a single path. But sometimes you got to just keep paying the bills, doing the job you have, and then slowly pivoting towards where you're trying to head. All right. So a final thing, and so I do have a free course. It's called the Career Launch Action Plan. And it's a really quick 45-minute course. It's about how long I've been going here almost. Well, I've been going about 40 minutes here, but it's a 45-minute course. You can go to careerlaunchactionplan.com. I talk about things like always be marketing, how to optimize your LinkedIn profile, and things like that. Okay, so check out careerlaunchactionplan.com, and we probably should get to questions. So let me recap real quick as I take a sip of my Diet Coke here. And then we'll answer your questions. Some of them are more comments, kind of funny. Anywho, all right. So recap, 7 levers. I keep wanting to say layers, levers that you can pull to overcome ageism in 2021. So first is authority. Second is Yoda, I am. Think of yourself more as a coach or someone preparing others to succeed. Be the grown-up in the room, time on platform. Number 5 is find your intersection between attainable and essential. Number 6 is having a mostly cloudy outlook. And number 7 is having a career relevancy pivot plan. All right. So let me pull in the chat here and let me stop sharing my screen. But you can always also go to my website, which is mikewheelermedia.com, and just click on the contact form, and that will do it. All right. So let's look at the chat here, and let's see. All right. So what do we got? So one question, someone missed the first 30 minutes. Will there be a replay? Yes, there will. And so wherever you're watching from, the replay will be posted there on the platform. Looks like you're on LinkedIn. So just look for that wherever you're watching now. And once that is encoded, then that will appear. All right. And then, yeah, so I've added the chat here. Hopefully that's okay and you don't mind here. But all right, who else? So Godservative on YouTube saying, too late, Mike, I got fired for doing trailhead on duty. So I don't know if you're serious or joking, but anyway, it's kind of strikes me as funny if you get fired for doing trailhead on duty. But you do have to weigh, if you are being paid to learn, it's more project related, and perhaps the trailhead is done after hours, you know. So, all right, let's see, who else we got? Any questions? So someone on LinkedIn saying, my guess is that older applicants are less likely to jump ship for more money and be more loyal. Perhaps. So, you know, there's been some salary surveys that I've seen recently by different organizations, and also questions around how long people have been in their current roles. And at least in the Salesforce ecosystem, I see that there's a lot of people that stay between 18 to 36 months, and then they bounce to their next opportunity. And for whatever reason, once people land a job, the company that they land the job with want to kind of pigeonhole them and limit, typically, not always, but typically there's limited room for advancement. And a lot of times to advance, whether that's with greater responsibilities and or greater pay, a lot of times you're seen more as an expert if you change companies more than if you just stay in your existing organization. That really just differs, though, depending on the organization that you're with. And so if you happen to find yourself, you know, in a more mature organization with a really clearly defined career path laid out, then that can be somewhere that you could really stay and mature with and write out the final stages of your career, if you will. Looks like there's another question that came in. All right, so one note, and this is coming from Chase, is that one question that shouldn't be asked is, how old are you? And this is something that my son was asked on an interview, and he's quite young. So ageism can also occur for those on the younger end of the spectrum that are just out of high school or college. And Chase points out that the Age Discrimination and Employment Act of 1967, it does protect people 40 or older from being discriminated against in the workplace in favor of younger workers, okay? So you can kind of ask the question or whatever, but it's not a good idea. And so I think that if you are ever asked, or if they're asking around or trying to get at, when did you graduate from high school, or when did you graduate from college, or if they just flat out ask you, how old are you? I think that a good approach that you can take is just saying, in order to protect you as a company, I think that you could, act confused or whatever, say, well, it's funny that you should ask, because I thought that that was an illegal question nowadays. So in order to protect your company, I probably shouldn't answer that, but I'm old enough to do the job, or I'm young enough to do the job, depending on where you are in the equation. So thanks, Chase, for the feedback there. And then Stephanie Rhodes had mentioned on LinkedIn, one of my students, and I mentioned her earlier, who had been hired out of retirement at the age of 68, and she's getting ready to turn 72 this summer. Her perspective is that age is just a number, and you make the job. I probably should look up exactly what she said, because I'm butchering her quote, but the main point is that age is just a number, and she's been a great example of someone that's gone out and landed a job, stayed in a job, and with a company that actually went through a bankruptcy as well and survived rounds of layoffs as well. And that kind of shows you just how in demand these skills are in the cloud, is that someone that's coming out of retirement in her late 60s and now into her 70s with a pandemic going on and bankruptcy for the company she worked for, has been able to survive because her skills are so essential to their success, okay? All right, new messages. Let's see what else we got. All right, so Vitali's asking how to involve my wife to learn about Salesforce platform. She is a pipeline designer in oil and gas industry. So great question, Vitali. I do see more and more couples and family members learning. And so I think I've seen this in my live classes or on-demand stuff. And I've got some people personally to me that I know that have family members all learning. And these could be people in high school, or adults in their 40s or 50s or 60s or whatever it may be. And so I think starting out a loved one, such as a wife, on this would be getting her signed up for a Trailhead account, and kind of mentoring. It's a great experience if it's someone that you're wanting to help out, such as your wife. You could do more of a mentorship role and help her with creating applications and making some experience on the platform, getting her familiar with Trailhead. And then as well, you learn a lot by training others. And that's how I learned the most, was whenever I went down the path of starting to create a certification course for the Salesforce Administrator certification. This was back in 2016 when I started this. And that really identified a lot of gaps for me in my knowledge. And also, what can identify your gaps is to go on interviews as well. So doing things such as trying to train others is very helpful. And that doesn't have to be in a public setting. It can be something that's private. And, I've done that as well recently and in the past 5 years, because I've got several sons, some that work on the platform, some that do not. But whenever they were starting out, I would be doing a lot of one-on-one training to prepare them for certifications or prepare for interviews. And that would show me gaps in my own knowledge, because as I'm preparing them, or I'm creating new assets for my students, such as self-assessment checklist or 9-week challenge, or all these different things that I've created to help others, there's things that I run across. I'm like, I'm not really sure about that. Or there's questions that are asked. Like last night on my live class, I was just asked a question that I'd never been asked before. And the answer was, I don't know. And I have to go and find that out. And those are things that become good lessons as well. So I think just taking the time to introduce her to Trailhead, perhaps some of my content, but then ultimately building some applications that solve problems in your own lives, and you as a couple there may be things that would be helpful, such as household management is something that comes to mind, or inventory management around groceries or supplies. And I think, Vitaly, you're in Moscow, I think, and so preparing for winter could be a good thing that comes to mind, as far as making sure you have the supplies you need or whatever. Having something to relate to real life, real world, right here, right now is always helpful. And so I think back to when one of my sons was learning Salesforce and starting out many years ago. He created an application that helped to measure carbs for one of my sons that was diabetic, so that we could track his intake of carbs, so that we would know how much insulin to administer. Now, that's something you got to be careful with. I don't advise that for everybody, but you want to be very sure that your app is working correctly and you're not overdosing someone on insulin and killing them. So, but things that are more innocuous and safe would be things like mileage tracker. I actually have a video, my most popular video on YouTube right now. So if you hit my YouTube channel, is one where I create an application in 12 minutes. I show how easy it is to build an app on the platform. It's a mileage tracker application. So if you're having to track your mileage for your job or your job pursuits, that's something you could do as well. So great question. All right. More messages. All right. All right, Robert is saying from LinkedIn, any advice for new path direction? I have 20 years as a healthcare professional, 10 years of military, and 2 years of law enforcement. That's awesome, Robert. You got a good mix there. All right. So a few things for you. 20 years as a healthcare professional, there's a few options that come to mind. One is the Health Cloud for Salesforce, and there's no certification for that yet. But you can get some experience by signing up for a 30-day trial of the Health Cloud from Salesforce. I would not do that, though, until you're really ready to learn the applicable skills related to the Health Cloud. And so what I would do first is I would go for the administrator certification. If you want to go the path of Salesforce, there's probably something kind of parallel or relevant in other cloud platforms. I just know Salesforce, so that's what I'm going to speak to. And so learning the fundamentals of the platform through the administrator certification, and then going towards Health Cloud perhaps. And there are implementation guides for every cloud offering that Salesforce has. And so I would just Google Health Cloud Implementation Guide, Salesforce. That's a huge PDF that takes you through implementing Health Cloud. So then you could sign up for a 30-day trial, do a run through that guide, and do an implementation for a fictional healthcare organization. Because you have those 20 years of experience, you know a lot around care plans. And I'm getting a little tickle in my throat here, so I'm going to pull out the water in my bubba, my good old standby. But so look for implementation guides, and the same would hold true for others in other verticals and industries, is to look for implementation guides around those specific verticals. Salesforce has Industries Cloud. They have clouds across all sorts of industries, all right? So, all right, other questions? Anyone else? All right, so let me leave you with this, because I'm not going to be all salesy or whatever, but I do want to make you aware of the Career Launch Action Plan. I'm going to put this in the chat, and let's see if this distributes out to the different platforms that we're on. And there's a question from Wendy. Awesome. So Career Launch Action Plan, putting that in the chat, go to careerlaunchactionplan.com, and that will take you down the path of putting together your own action plan for your career in order to have greater relevance into these next 10 or 20 years of your career, or however many years you plan to work. And really, it's all about finding relevance in the economy, having marketable skills. All right. So Wendy is asking, what is Salesforce CPQ? That stands for Configure, Price, Quote. That kind of builds on top of the Sales Cloud, and this is for more complex pricing scenarios in order to create and configure pricing and quotes. And it is a specialized certification. It's very in demand, and so if you have that or attain that, it would make you very marketable. It's one of the most in-demand skill sets in the Salesforce ecosystem, as well as field service is another one that's more in the Service Cloud. And so the path for these certifications, these specialty certifications, would be administrator first. That'd be the foundation. because typically that's a prerequisite for what comes next, which would be either Sales Cloud or Service Cloud Consultant. And then CPQ would be a good one to have after Sales Cloud Consultant. That's more in the Sales Cloud. And then on the Service Cloud side of things, especially certification would be Field Service. And that's where you go into things around field service for those technicians that go out and service things, have vans and dynamic routing and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. All right. All right. So we are approaching an hour of time, and so I think it's time to bring this in for a landing. I want to thank each of you for joining me, and be sure and check out mikewheelermedia.com, and you can always hit my website and then contact me. And then as well, under the training menu, you'll find all of my different courses and resources, links to my free stuff, my paid things as well. I do on-demand courses and then live courses such as for Salesforce Administrator certification. And I'll just leave you here at the end with a big long list of links that you can check out. And if you're not sure what they are, you can get more detail on each of them through my website, which is mikewheelermedia.com, and then go under the training section or menu, and you'll have all those listed there as well. But I've put those in the chat, and check those out as you can. And so I want to thank you all. And so there's a question from Sarita, what's my website? Let me show that. All right, so my website is, let me put my website up. Let's do that. And so I'm getting familiar as well with Restream. And so my website, I've got, here it is mikewheelermedia.com. Okay, that's to train, inspire, and equip you for your cloud career. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. All right, so thank you so much for your time. And so until we meet again,